Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a couple of minutes. While we wait, Allison has put a question in the chat box that you can all respond to. We'd love to hear what's one thing you've learned in the coronavirus era since this has all started. We've all adopted a lot of changes in our life, and we'd love to hear what some of those are for you. So again, thank you for joining us and hang tight. We'll get started in just a couple minutes here.
Hello, I hope everyone can hear me. Do a little tester. This is Sasha Corberling from the Coalition on Homelessness. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We are going to be getting started. We have some more people joining us this morning and getting on the call. So we'll just start with a little bit of our Zoom logistics and setting the space, and then I will pass it on to Jason. Give it a sec. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. Oh, see, there's some chat. There we go. Okay, great. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is the Coalition on Homelessness April 16th General Membership Meeting. Our last meeting in March, we reached our capacity of 100, so we are very excited to share that we upgraded that. So please invite your colleagues, invite your friends to join us. We have a very good agenda today and some good content, and we're happy to be able to host this virtually with you all. As you can see, we're setting our space a little differently than we may have in March, and also very differently than we would in person. Usually we would like to go around the room and to ask everyone to introduce themselves, but as we unfortunately don't have the capacity to do so, we ask that you rename yourself in the meeting if you're able. If you're on a phone, we recognize you're not able to do that, but if you are on a computer, if you could please rename yourself with your name and your agency. You can do that by highlighting over your little box and clicking rename, or if you go to participants, you should be at the top and you can click more and go to rename. So you'll notice that all the coalition staff will have their name and then the word coalition after that. Our agenda is available on our blog, and we will use this blog as well to share resources and a video recording after the meeting is over. And you'll be able to find, for those who attended March or are interested about our March meeting, that there's also a blog with our March meeting resources and video recording. Additionally, people are muted upon entering the call. We have a lot of people joining us and we have a lot of great presenters, so we would like the focus to be on them, of course. However, you are able to unmute yourself when it comes to questions and presenters, and we will also keep track of any noise if necessary. So we may mute you if we see that there's background noise coming from you. Additionally, we welcome question and comments in the chat box and resource sharing. Please know that we may not have the time to answer all of them. We have a lot of important information to cover, but we are tracking all the questions. If you're on the phone, we encourage you to email us if possible. If we have time for questions, we will have a segment of opening up to people who are joining us via the phone, but you're able to reach us via email with any additional questions and comments and feedback as well about our meeting. And with that as well, we also are inviting you to share as we continue to get into the meeting of what is something you have learned during the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is, we're asking that for us to be able to reflect on this time of our communities, our networks with work and personal. We're very happy that you all have made the time to come share your Thursday morning with us, and we value that. So this is something that we open up to everyone to think about. And with that, I will pass it on to Jason. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sasha. Again, as Sasha mentioned, we have posted a copy of our agenda on our website for you to be able to follow along as we go through our meeting. All right, so welcome everyone. This is our April general membership meeting. As we have been, we are hosting these on the third Thursday of every month. My name is Jason Austin, membership organizer with the Coalition on Homelessness. Thank you so much for giving us part of your morning here. I think to start us off with, I'm going to pass things over to Allison Eisinger, our executive director, who has been doing some really amazing work here.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Allison Eisinger, the director of the Coalition. I think we lost Jason briefly at the end there, but thank you, Jason. Jason, I will say if your audio is giving you trouble, you might try turning your video off, and then we'll just have to do without your smiling face and your cat coworkers. As many of you who are regular attendees of our in-person meetings know, we usually start after introductions with someone reading our mission statement. And I'm extremely delighted to say that right now we are going to be able to share with you our new mission statement. We have a new mission, vision, and set of values to share with everyone, and we'll be taking some time at our May 21st meeting to talk about those in greater depth. But right now, our new mission statement is at the bottom of the slide that is before you all. And in Coalition tradition, we'd like to ask for a volunteer to unmute themselves and be able to read the mission statement on the bottom of this slide here. I can't see everybody who's on the call, so if somebody wants to raise their hand and participate. I see that Jen Romo, who's one of our board members, is on the call. And Jen, I'm wondering if you would like to, oh, and there's Ben. So if you can unmute yourself, Jen or Ben.
Jen, do you want to have the honor? Well, I guess.
I'm on my phone right now, so I can't, unfortunately. Ben, are you able to?
Okay.
I would be delighted to get
Thank
to.
you.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. We mobilize our community to challenge systemic causes of homelessness and advocate for housing justice.
Thank you, Ben. Well, we'll all have that memorized shortly. Among the many things that are happening this month, April is National Poetry Month. It is a little strange that we only think to do this 1 month out of the year, so we'll try to counter that by having more poetry and more music and more art, since we need all of those things. I'm extremely pleased that we have with us this morning Anitra Freeman, who is a poet, an activist, a raging granny, a community leader, and an inspiration to me personally. And Anitra is with, among other organizations, Wheel and Real Change, and has agreed to share a poem, or possibly two if they're short, with us to start our meeting this morning. Anitra, take it away.
Good morning. Well, it's a grim time, and I was looking for something that both was appropriate and on the lighter side. I found a crowd favorite about escaping from hospital. Many years ago, my mother was locked up in a little room in St. Francis Cabrini Hospital because we didn't know what else to do back then with women who saw demons coming in through the walls. But Mother knew. Mother knew lots better things to do than to be locked up in a little room in spring. She ripped her down pillow open with her teeth, blew handfuls of soft white feathers under the door, and yelled, "Fire! Fire!" An orderly actually came and threw the door open. Faster than a naked toddler, Mother zipped under his arm, skinned down the hall, slammed through the main doors, and raced down the sidewalk. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, broad daylight, 92 pounds in a flapping hospital gown, long, wiry black hair, and feathers. Yelling, "Fire!" Mother told me the story herself. I was never so proud of her. This day, I stand a little taller when I have feathers in my hair. And I have one more, since I have a little bit more time, about service. I wanted to do something about service. This was written as a gift from Wheel to Uncle Bob Santos when he retired from HUD. And it applies to a lot of other people. There is joy in the hard work, the long hours, the bone deep tired, when you see their faces, peaceful, happy, rested. There is joy in the risk, the challenge, when your soul in the mirror is at peace, rested, whole. There is grief in parting. We carry each other's hearts in our treasure chest to share with friends we look for in the future. But we will miss the people our people will become. Our grief will not drown the past. Its well will water the growth of the future, deep, dark, and rich with the weight of memories to lay at the roots of new growth. Some souls risk all for life, for the lives of others. They have faces like yours, alive with growth, rich with memory, with a whole wide soul open in them.
Anitra, thank you so much. We've been touched by your words so often, and I thank you so much for joining us and sharing them in person. There is nothing like hearing you read those words. I think with your permission, probably people would like to ask if you would share those poems, and maybe with your permission, we could share them in a follow-up email or share them on our blog in an appropriate way.
Certainly, I'll send you the links. My life is an open website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anitra. We're all in need of the talents of our comrades and colleagues and coworkers and allies in these times. And I feel those words really sinking in. Thank you.
Okay. If there's time at the end, I have two more to share.
Wonderful. You're the best. Thank you. We will try very hard to stick to our agenda. I see people nodding, so we will try very hard to make that time work. And I will just briefly follow up by saying that among the things that are new is that the coalition has launched a new fund. We've never before granted resources to other organizations. We're, as I think you all know, a small organization ourselves, but we felt acutely the need for additional support to go directly to the organizations that are on the ground right now in our community. So we have launched, and this is the official public statement about it, our Solidarity Fund. There's information on our homepage, homelessinfo.org, and this is a fund that is powered by generous donations from people who understand that the government resources are not necessarily available to do all kinds of things that need to be done, or they're not available quickly enough. So thanks to some of our donors, longstanding and new, we have been fortunate enough to already make a few crucial grants to help buy a couple of secondhand vehicles for organizations that are directly working with people experiencing homelessness, as well as to buy some resources, very practical things for outreach workers to distribute. We may be making a purchase of masks that have been made available at cost by one of our community partner organizations. And there is what we hope is a very short, straightforward, easy to use application process up on our website. And we would like to hear from, generally speaking, smaller organizations that are doing direct service work, particularly with people who are unsheltered, who have not had their basic needs met for a very long time and are now in acute crisis. So please help spread the word about that. And of course, we gratefully accept donations, both to the Solidarity Fund and to power our coalition's work. As I think many of you know, but I will just reiterate, normally the first quarter of the year is when we consolidate our membership drive for the year. We are a membership coalition. This year, we've taken the step of suspending our membership drive in recognition of the fact that most of our member organizations are scrambling. And we're very, very grateful to those that are still paying their membership dues, and some organizations that have the wherewithal to join us for the first time. So we're not accepting membership dues, but we want to recognize the circumstances for our member organizations and make some adjustments. We will, however, be coming in the fall. So as you are working on your readjusted budgets for the year, please consider that coalition membership dues will be gratefully accepted and solicited starting in the fall again. So with that, I'm going to ask Hillary to speak about a project that coalition staff have been working diligently on with many of you, our members, for the last 3 weeks, and that is our homeless service change tracker. So Hillary is going to describe it briefly, and I'll turn it over to her.
Hi everyone, good morning. Thanks for being here with us today. And I just also wanted to give you a note, if my eyes are faced a different direction, it's because I have a couple screens and my notes are on a different screen. But I really just wanted to start by saying thank you to everyone for the services you are doing and for the way that everyone is rapidly shifting and adapting to the need for change due to this pandemic, on top of the crisis of homelessness that we already have in our community. So a lot of you know, because we also mentioned this, I can't remember if we mentioned this on our last call. I think we previewed it, but as Allison just mentioned, we have been developing a homeless service change tracker, and we are about to launch that in a slightly public-facing way on our website. We'll send you that in the follow-up email. But really what we've been doing, and I want to say big kudos to Jason and Sasha, and then Penny, who I think is on this call and was one of our volunteers in her personal time doing some calls, and some staff from the Housing Alliance.
I didn't teach her. She said I taught her peers.
For
So try to connect on.
Calling over 60 over 60 provider organizations and talking to folks from about 160 programs across the county. We really wanted to get a picture of what services are currently open, what their current operating hours are. We know this changes a lot, but we wanted to make sure that we have that information both for our system view, and then that we also found a way to to share that with you all, the service providers in this community. So the purpose of this, we have a Google Sheet that we are going to be sharing in a way that you can view only. And the purpose of it is going to be to provide information to Coalition on Homelessness member and partner organizations and local government about changes that are happening in our homeless service network as a response to COVID. And we have a statement on it that says, you know, we've collected this, and really our purpose is for you providers to be able to see. We know that there's some need for, when people are doing outreach, to need to know what the actual availability is of some services. And what things are open. I think, you know, overall, like we are all seeing, there are really not many places for people to go during the day that didn't already have an option of somewhere to go. A lot of shelters are expanding to 24/7 if they weren't already, and aren't able to have more people join. Our shelters are full, our day centers are full, and at capacity, and a lot of our public places to use the restroom are closed. So there's kind of more advocacy to come around that, but this we hope will be helpful for you all for using. We ask that our provider network, which is all of you, use it and share it with your staff, but our goal is not for this to be somewhere where, for example, a community member that was trying to find support for someone they're talking to can go to and figure it out. Because we're going to do our best to keep it up to date. So we'll be sending an email to the primary contacts for each site that we talk to once a week, just saying, you know, can you go check and let us know if anything has changed about your services. And if anyone has any information they want to add, notices@homelessinfo.org is the email we'll be using to collect information. It'll be on the tracker as well. And yeah, I just wanted to, so that we'll be sending it out later today, and it will be posted somewhere on our website under a members area that will let you all know where it is. But we just really wanted to thank everyone for being part of that. And if anyone, while you're using it, has questions or suggestions, please feel free to reach out and let us know. The other thing I did want to mention is that there's a date column that says the last date that information was updated. So I would, when you're using it, make sure you're looking at that column. And I would encourage you, especially if it's a bit of an older date and you're going to try to refer someone somewhere, it might be good to call ahead just to make sure that information is still correct. We're going to do the best we can on our end, and we appreciate your partnership on this. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christina Wong with Northwest Harvest. And Christina, we are really grateful for her being here today to share a brief update about some of the things happening with food distribution and food security in our state and locally. And so we want to invite Christina to talk for a couple of minutes, and then there will be a little bit of time for some questions. If you have any questions for Christina about this, I would say please type them into the chat box, and I'll read the questions out loud. If you're on the phone, we can open it up at the after Christina's done sharing, to ask a couple of phone questions as well if anyone has them. But Christina's just going to share a brief update, so I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Hillary, and thank you all for having me today. Just bear with me for a moment while I pull up my notes about what I want to make sure that I talk about. I also start every online presentation these days to put people on notice that I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old at home with me. As I'm sure many of you also have children working from who are at home with you as well, but in case there's any little interruptions, that's what's happening. Where to begin? I'll start with saying that at Northwest Harvest, and in conjunction with our other food distributors in the state, Food Lifeline and Second Harvest, we did an initial needs assessment for the state. And we think that the number of food insecure people in Washington state has gone from about 800,000 people before the start of this crisis to now 1.6 million people. And that needs estimate was based on the number of people who are food insecure in each county, combined with the number of children in our state that are eligible for free and reduced price lunches and breakfast at schools. Also the percentage of seniors in our state who are living in poverty, and the number of applications for unemployment benefits in the first couple weeks after the stay-home order. Then taking out some potentials for duplications across those categories. But the number we've arrived at is 1.6 million people. As far as food banks are concerned, we have really had to shift our model of service delivery with the social distancing requirements that are in place, where we've been trying to minimize in-person contact as much as possible. And I often describe this as it feels like we're living in the upside down of Stranger Things, or we have reverted back to the early 80s, because the food bank network, we have been so proud and about the work that's been done to get more fresh produce into our system. It's both what's desired and what is also good for health for many of the people who use food banks. But in order to get us through this initial crisis where people are having to stay in place for a while and not more restricted in their movement, we have reverted to pre-packing boxes of shelf-stable food items for people. So that way our food bank partners can get a shipment of boxes and be able to deliver those either by home delivery or curbside pickup or walk-up pickup. As far as meal programs are concerned, we're not distributing those boxes of food to meal programs, but what we have at our warehouses is available for meal programs to still come and shop and pick up items for them to prepare. We've been working really hard on food, and then also the other big need for food banks and meal programs has been supplies. For food banks, it's been those supplies like boxes and tape for, or plastic bags for packing up food for people to go. And then for meal programs, particularly the congregate meals, once the restaurant orders went into place, it's been trying to find takeout containers and bags for them to be able to serve meals in a grab and go style. The three distributors, Northwest Harvest, Food Lifeline, Second Harvest, we are part of a state food security coordination team that Governor Inslee appointed. That is staffed by J.T. Austin, who is the governor's agriculture policy person, and also Katie Rains, who works at the State Department of Agriculture with the director, with the WSDA director's office. WSDA Director Derek Sanderson co-convenes the food security coordination team with J.T. Austin. And that is bringing together the different state agencies that run public benefits. So DSH for SNAP, Department of Health because of WIC, and those Fresh Bucks SNAP incentive, fruit and vegetable vouchers. Also OSPI because of school meals, and WSDA because of the support that they provide for food banks. So those state agencies, plus the 3 nonprofits, also staff from the governor's policy teams and from the Office of Finance Management, because they are really scrubbing the budget and also what money is becoming available from the federal government to find opportunities to fund food relief. The message that they're really trying to carry is that we shouldn't be trading one public health crisis for another, meaning that addressing food insecurity is an absolute part of a comprehensive public health response. What the state coordination team is also trying to do is put together a gap analysis county by county in the state, which is going to be determining how many people have been accessing all those different services, what trying to predict or rather looking through the resources, where are the gaps in service, and then trying to get in front of those by getting resources in place so that we can make sure that nobody is missing a meal moving forward. Then the last piece I wanted to talk about with how our distribution model has changed is normally Northwest Harvest, we operate statewide. We have partnered with 375 food pantries, meal programs, and high needs schools throughout the state. Food Lifeline also has been partnering with more than 300 food banks and meal programs in Western Washington, and Second Harvest is their counterpart in Eastern Washington. Under an agreement with the state, because the resources are limited and the cost of the response is so great, and that's because of the increased need for food combined with packing those boxes of shelf-stable food is a much more costly model for us because it's requiring more labor, it's requiring the purchasing of shelf-stable food, which we haven't had in our warehouses because of that focus on fresh. So in order to be able to use our limited resources most efficiently, each of those 3 organizations have been asked to prioritize our resources into sending emergency food boxes to food banks and meal programs that are just within an assigned allotment of about 13 counties each. And what that means is that programs that Northwest Harvest normally serves that are not in our assigned areas during this COVID-19 crisis, Food Lifeline or Second Harvest will be picking up those programs to get them food boxes. And in turn, Northwest Harvest is picking up partners, our member agencies from Food Lifeline and Second Harvest that are in our areas that they have had to discontinue services during this COVID crisis in order to prioritize resources going into our assigned areas. If you want to find more information about that process and how it works, and also who to contact if you have questions or have identified problems, there is a FAQ that our 3 organizations have co-written and co-issued. You can find that on Northwest Harvest's page. If you click on the link for our COVID-19 response, you'll see a hyperlink in the text there for the frequently asked questions. The other thing you'll find on our page is if you click on the box that says need food, we can help, then that you'll see at the top of that page a link for a Google map that Northwest Harvest and Food Lifeline have been working on. That's basically, it's a good transition from what Hillary was just talking about. It's on that Google map, you will find all of the food banks that Northwest Harvest, Food Lifeline, and Second Harvest are serving. Also refined for what programs are actually still open. Some programs have had to close, but that Google map is kept up to date with what are the programs that are currently open. You can search by location, and when you click on a program, you should see a detailed list of what their hours of service are, how their distribution model is working, all that information to help you get resources to people who are coming to you for help.
Great.
So with that, I will happily take any questions.
Thanks so much, Christina. And because we have a really packed agenda, I think Allison has one question, and then I saw a question in the chat box about volunteers. And I think maybe if you were able to after Allison asked her question, just answer that one in the chat box. And if anyone else has questions, we are happy to get answers in the follow-up. I just want to make sure we're staying as on time in our packed agenda as possible. But go ahead, Allison.
Thank you, Christina. Yes, I think a lot of people want to help, so letting folks know how they can volunteer would be great. And we know that you have to leave, but we'll follow up with you afterwards to make sure we're sharing the resources that you just talked about. I want to just say, it sounds to me like what is happening is very reasonable, that these 3 statewide organizations are coming together with the state level policy and departmental partners. And what strikes me is that we have not so far succeeded in doing the parallel on homelessness. And it is remarkable to me to see what has been possible, including deployment of National Guard personnel to provide needed assistance at the food banks. And what I hope that we can do is to talk a little bit about the interconnected nature of these sectors. We have been pushing, I know Representative Macri has raised this issue, and I think we are working as hard as we can to raise the awareness within the governor's office of both the need for National Guard to be deployed to provide support to homeless service providers, as well as the need for a statewide convened table to help do some of the kinds of emergency smart division of labor that you're describing. So I really appreciate your laying that out for everyone. My quick question for you is, what is the practical effect for King County-based meal and food bank providers of this shift in which of your, which organization is going to be their go-to organization? If you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Northwest Harvest, we in agreement with Food Lifeline, we have taken South King County, which has been defined as if you draw a straight line through Burien down south to the county border, and then all other areas, including Seattle, north, central, and eastern King County, our Food Lifeline will be your lead. And if you go to that Google map that I was describing, it's also color coded by blue. A blue dot is for Northwest Harvest, and a green dot is for Food Lifeline. So you should be able to find information from there as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We really, really appreciate the hard and wonderful, thoughtful work that you're doing, and hope that you'll keep us informed about things that we need to know. And please do answer the question about volunteer needs, because I know there are eager people who want to help. And now I think we're going to shift to other policy issues that relate to protecting tenants. And I think since I'm talking, I'll just jump in here, Jason. We're so grateful to V. Wynn, who is a policy staffer in Seattle City Council member Lorena Gonzalez's office, who's going to speak about a couple of important bills that Councilmember Gonzalez has proposed and how folks might be able to support passage of that legislation. And V will be followed by Sochi Makovich from Washington Can, who will talk about strengthening and expanding the state level eviction moratorium.
Great. So I will try to go through this quickly, but not too quickly, so that we can get the salient points. So hi, everyone. My name is V. Nguyen. I am Senior Policy Advisor to Council President Gonzalez for the Seattle City Council. Allison asked me to share about 2 bills that Council President Gonzalez is sponsoring that we're hoping will be passed sometime this month, ideally this coming Monday. There are 2 bills, Council Bill 11761 and 119762. I'll drop the link into the chat box. Essentially what these 2 bills and how it started was that it's really hard to sometimes think like 6 weeks ago, life was so different. And so as the crisis started really settling in, and we just knew that the economy is going to be impacted, renters are going to be impacted, and what can we do to really put some additional protections into place? And so the 2 bills do that. So I got to work with our team of policy analysts, and we've identified 2 things that we can actually do legally given the restrictions that we have per our state laws, around adding to our just cause eviction ordinance, and then the other, which is Council Bill 761. And that what it would do is, like, instead of saying there's no evictions and that kind of stuff, because legislatively we don't have the power to do so. What we can do is say that, you know, if you are a tenant that was impacted by the COVID-19 crisis and that you're in eviction proceedings, that one of the things that you can claim as part of your defense is being a household that was impacted by the COVID-19 crisis financially. So again, it's a little bit more in the weeds of, we're all aware of, like, the rent strikes and rent moratoriums and mortgage stuff relief that we're looking for, but this is one of the things in the meantime that can be a tool that we can use to help tenants stay in place and to have some additional defenses against protections against evictions. The other thing that we identified that we could do for our state constitution and our state laws is that we can actually ask, we can actually say that, you know, during this, tying it to the crisis, that we know that people are waiting for unemployment benefits to come online. We know that different forms of relief and assistance programs are taking some time to work all the way through the pipeline and make it to the people who need them. So hopefully with Council Bill 19762, that we can enact rental payment plans. Even before the crisis, having to pay all of your rent at the top of the month, you know, kind of leaves you on this, like, financial seesaw, because your paycheck is pretty much gone before you can even really, like, do anything with it just to pay rent. So hopefully with the payment plan, it helps people manage their household budgets and what they need to do for their home and their families and themselves a little bit better. And really, like, the idea that came out of this is that, you know, we know that there are benefits that are coming online, like whatever benefits that, you know, people are needing to access. And this just gives more time, more flexibility for people to figure that out. Just again, thinking that, like, it was like 6 weeks ago, we had, you know, our old normal, and even then things were challenging. And so, like, now that we have such a magnitude of need, what are ways that we can inject time into, you know, what is what we did traditionally. So those are the two bills. I'm really, really grateful to Sochi of Washington Can and Edmund from KCBA, the Housing Justice Project, that has provided a lot of insights, advice, and just knowledge of, like, you know, well, this is actually what practice is, and you know, this is what is the reality of, like, how this would actually play out. And so again, I'm really, really grateful to that. And so one of the things that we've done is we've created kind of like a story collection, because I think we're all hearing things anecdotally of how people are really anxious about how they're paying rent, but, like, they just, like, you know, like, but we're not, like, I haven't seen any like formal story collection when we launched this. And so I put it into the chat box, but we're doing things two ways. So you can, like, people can email their stories directly to City Council. So that's cd19_rent@seattle.gov, and share their stories. And then there's also a survey that we had put together so that, you know, we can just really kind of get some data and just hear from people directly of, like, what has their experience been like in terms of applying for benefits and trying to work things out with their landlords. You know, because, like, are we actually trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist? But, you know, what some of the stories have yielded is just, like, it's pretty all over the map, and it's I think really interesting to see how, you know, people are trying to figure out how to weather all of this together. And I think I'm going to park it there to not just to be sensitive to time. Allison, providing background on the two bills and my contact information. And I don't know if we have time for questions, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Bea. Why don't we ask people to put any specific questions about the Seattle City Council legislation into the chat box while we let Sochi start talking. And then the one question that I saw was about the timing of the vote. And I believe you said at the beginning that it's anticipated this legislation will come before the council on Monday. Is that right?
That's my goal right now.
Okay.
You know,
Great. Thank you very much.
What I want and what happens is not always the same thing. So
okay. Thank you very much. Sochi.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi. So, okay, so the eviction moratorium. I guess a couple of things to share. So I'm on my phone, so I'll put some stuff in the chat after I'm done talking.
I will
so
just say,
like
just before you start, Sochi, I will just say you're on your phone, but you're sideways.
Oh, I'm sideways? Oh, is that better?
We can still hear you, but yes, there we go. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so couple updates. So the governor passed an eviction moratorium, and it's set to expire tomorrow. But he has assured us that they are going to extend the moratorium. Now, whenever they first passed it, there were some holes in it. Where, it didn't apply to, lease violations. It didn't apply to lease renewal situations. The text didn't apply to, from the attorney's understanding, didn't apply to mobile home parks or ban late fees, but the attorney general has said that in his interpretation, I think it's honestly just because he wishes that it was in there, but whatever, is that it bans late fees and it applies to mobile home parks. So the attorney general is enforcing it. I think as of Monday, they had like over 400 complaints. But they're likely to extend it, and I think they're going to strengthen it. Now, one of the things is that it's likely only going to be extended for another 30 days, unless there's like Republican support, just because of the need for that, I guess, for some reason. But who knows? And so I think as far as the things to be pushing for is, one, we definitely need this expanded. The other thing I will say, this is a very amazing thing, is that there is a federal eviction moratorium, and it applies to any properties that have federal subsidies or a federally insured mortgage. There is a spreadsheet that I can send around, and that has, like, you can search to see if your property is on there. Now, it doesn't have single family homes because there's no like public database of single family home properties with federally insured mortgages, but it does have all the multifamily properties. The other thing, so the way the eviction moratorium works is that there's a 6-month or 120-day moratorium. And then the landlord, and this is on the federal level, the landlord can't give a notice to vacate for 30 days. So the first time they're going to be able to give an eviction notice is on August 23rd. And then after that, they have to give 30-day notices. Now, the very strange thing is they didn't put a sunset clause in the 30-day notice requirement. So basically, if you look at just what's in the text, they've kind of translated all eviction notices for federally insured mortgages, properties, and properties with federal subsidies into, you have to have a 30-day notice to vacate for everything across the board. Lease violation, non-payment, whatever. And to think of what the magnitude of that is, that's about half of the properties in the country. And about half the states have 3 or 5 day pay or vacates. I mean, our pay or vacate was extended last year to 14 days. So I think that is, for about half the tenants in the country, the earliest that they're going to be able to get an eviction filed against them is not until September, which is awesome. But it's important for people to know if they're living in one of those properties. It's really easy to know if if your rent is connected to your income, or you had to make a low enough income to get into the property, then you're more than likely living in a federally subsidized property. But you should definitely double check, and people should definitely double check. And then I think as far as like, what can we do after this eviction moratorium? I think we need to be pushing the state legislature, because, like, you know, the state doesn't have enough money to pay the back rent. Like, I think that's pretty clear. And we're gonna need, we need to push all of our Congress members to start funding rent relief and mortgage relief. So, like, Washington Can sent out a e-blast to our members, you know, email your Congress members, tell them to support rent and mortgage relief. Denny Heck and Kilmer put a bill together that's $100 billion in rent relief. There was also another letter sent in by like 92 representatives saying that they want $100 billion in the budget for rent relief, in addition to other funding for homelessness and housing. And then from the state legislator side, we should be pushing them to do something like Councilmember Gonzalez's bills around, like, requiring payment plans, creating another defense to eviction. There's a lot of things that we can do legally that will reduce the likelihood of people becoming homeless. So I'll stop there.
Sochi, thank you so much. I wonder if we could just ask you to talk about two quick things. So you've given us a big sorry, my computer is not cooperating this morning. You've given us an overview of federal level, and indeed that $100 billion rent relief bill is definitely something that we'll probably ask coalition members to send emails in support of. I have two quick things for you to address. Is there anything that coalition folks on the phone here today can do to support strengthening and extending the statewide eviction moratorium now? And can you speak briefly to the issue of a rent strike and the idea that some have proposed that people simply stop paying their rent?
So I think as far as the eviction moratorium goes, so this is my understanding, is that the governor can't do anything longer than 60 days without approval from the Republican leadership, the Republic in both the House and the Senate, and then the Democrats in the House and the Senate, right? So from what I've gathered, he's going to likely extend this. They said they're going to extend it. It's gonna happen probably today. Okay. The question is kind of like, what do we do after that time period? It's gonna be just another 30 days at the most, unless there's a new legal analysis on what his strength, his ability to do stuff is. If people have good relationships with any Republican leadership, which I don't know if folks do, really push them, right? I think people in particular who are in areas that are rural should really be lifting up these stories, pushing legislators to realize this isn't just a Seattle problem, because too often the state legislature thinks of housing issues as a Seattle problem and not a problem for the entire state. And so, you know, people really should just be like, I guess, inundating their legislators with, like, you need to do something, you know, if we want to get this moratorium extended past that 30 days. And again, I do think that the governor is going to strengthen it. I haven't seen what their specific language is, and I know a lot of folks on this call did sign a letter to that, asking for all of those things. My thought is after we see what he does, because I think it's pretty much going to be decided today, is that whatever gaps that might be there, is that we need to shift to the local governments, right? Because the other thing is you can also get local governments to take action, right? So Seattle's moratorium is, I think, fairly long. Like Kenmore did one, Everett did one. So like, I think there's a tendency, I think, a lot of times to be thinking about state, but really the local cities have a lot of power, and we should be pushing them to do things as well.
Great,
thank you. On the rent strike part, like I guess, like you know, as an organizer, I think when I'm organizing folks, I want to be real with people, and I don't want to, you know, have people look at something with rose-colored glasses. And so I think it's really important for people to know, like, what the risks are. And it's like, we did pass an eviction reform bill last year, but it's designed to like help people who are in an emergency, right? So like if you can't pay your rent because of this crisis, the judges can look at that, use their discretion to come up with another option other than eviction. It doesn't waive the debt though, right? And if you're just somebody who is philosophically against renting, landlords and whatnot, which I have a lot of complicated feelings about the private housing market, so I understand that. But withholding your rent, you're setting yourself up for eviction. And I think being real about with people with what the consequences are. And there have only been 2 situations in the entire 6 years that I've been doing this where a rent strike was something that was on the table. And the demands were very specific they were very clear. So there's a lot of it around habitability and things like that. And it was also very targeted, right? Like one situation was around a nonprofit housing provider, who, I know there's a lot of y'all on here, but, and there's a lot of political things in play that make that an easier lift than a private one. And then one was a mobile home park, which mobile home parks are a lot easier to get everyone on board, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I just think rent strikes, it's not something that I'm doing, if that's it. But yeah, that's.
Thank you. No, I really appreciated your laying out some of the real facts about it. It's an important tool, but it's not necessarily an easy tool to deploy, and it is not necessarily where, I mean, there's a lot of risk associated with it. So I appreciate your analysis, Sochi. I'm going to now turn things back to Jason. I hope Jason's internet might be a little wonky, so we might not be able to see him, but he has worked with several partners to put together an excellent overview of some emergency policy changes to state level benefits that we think many of you on this call need to know about to support the folks you work with. Thank you very much, Vi and Sochi. And now I'm going to turn things over to Jason and our panel of folks from Solid Ground and DSHS.
Thank you, Allison. This presentation on public benefits is meant to be a follow-up from our Public Benefits 101 workshop, part of our case manager training series that happened back in December. The coalition has been thinking about how we can continue to offer these case manager trainings in the new normal, so stay tuned for that. This morning, we are joined by Eric with DSHS, as well as Hannah and Greta with Solid Ground, who have put together a really excellent presentation on some changes to food as well as cash assistance programs that have been implemented during the pandemic. Thank you so much for being on the call. I think, Eric, I'm going to throw things over to you to start with.
Well, thank you, Jason, and thank you, folks. My name is Eric Tayag. I am a social service training specialist. I train all staff regarding rules and regulations and how to administer public assistance programs. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share my screen first off, if that's okay. And I'm going to go through a number of different changes that have recently happened to public assistance programs. And this is all, what I do want everyone to keep in mind is that though these changes are taking effect, these changes are temporary, and they're contingent on the COVID-19.
Hey Eric, sorry to cut in. This is Hillary from the coalition. Your audio is getting really.
Give me one sec here.
Eric, can you hear me? Eric, I'll send you a message too, but your
pulls up.
Let's see. Eric, can you hear me at all?
So as I'm waiting for yes.
Oh, sorry, Eric, your audio is cutting in and out a lot, and I'm wondering if you can email your presentation to us, and we'll have Sasha share the screen instead so that your audio will be okay. Okay, it looks like we lost Eric, Jason.
Okay.
This is Hannah from Solid Ground. We were gonna share some information about getting in touch with us, and I could just jump on and do that while we're trying to get Eric.
Thank you. Why don't,
board.
That's great, Hannah. Jason, if you could please call Eric and follow up with him, and as Hillary suggested, maybe get him to email the presentation to Sasha. Thank you so much, Hannah, for jumping in.
Absolutely. So hi, everybody. I'm Hannah Rosenberger. I'm one of the benefits attorneys with Solid Ground. Greta Schultz, our program manager, she's also on the line here as well.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us.
And one thing that you maybe should have received or will receive is that Solid Ground, we have been staying up to date. Actually, I'll wind back and say that we provide legal assistance to low-income clients, generally in King County, who are having problems with their public benefits. That's DSHS, DCYF, Healthcare Authority, food, TANF. Those are just some examples of the benefits that we help folks with. So we have a one-page fact sheet that we've been keeping updated that we sent to Jason. So if you all haven't gotten it, you should get it. It's also on our website, and it's an easy, straightforward kind of update on all the different policy changes that have been happening around these public benefits. Our contact information is also at the bottom of that page. It has our intake line and then also an email. So if folks are denied benefits or get a notice that they're terminated or get more or less food than they think they should, folks can reach out to us by email or by phone. In normal time, we have walk-ins that can come to our office now. We're not doing any walk-ins, so folks should email or call us. The case manager can reach out to us directly. Usually we need some kind of release to then, if we're sharing information about the client, but if you as a caseworker are working with someone and you can contact us or be on the phone with the client, we're also happy to facilitate intakes that way. And we're keeping that one-page fact sheet updated as new policy information comes out. So it's a good place to just check back to our website. Just a general introduction on who we are. So I'll pass it over to Greta now.
I just have a couple things to add. And one is, as you'll hear when hopefully we get Eric back on the line, there have been a number of updates to our state public benefit systems during this crisis. And Solid Ground, in addition to many, many community partners, have been in constant conversation with DSHS to elevate the concerns of our clients, places where we think that temporary accommodation should be made during this crisis. And, you know, this isn't a stopping point for us. There are still a number of areas where we think we as a community could be doing better in terms of supporting these vital lifelines for our clients. And so the updates that DSHS is going to go over are kind of just, you know, just the beginning or what has happened thus far. And we are going to continue to be in conversation about what we can do more to support members of our community who are experiencing significant economic crisis. And I don't know if we have Eric back yet.
So what I'm going to suggest, I think Hillary and Sasha and Jason are working to try to make sure that they can get Eric connected and get his slides, and we will just be flexible and move on with some other parts of our agenda while they're working on that. But I think it would be helpful to give people a brief overview of the magnitude of those changes. And I realize you know that it might not be in depth, but among the things that I think people need to know about are changes to EBT, the ABOD rules and the TANF
Mhm.
Lifting, can you just quickly describe those to people?
Sure, absolutely. I can start by talking about the kind of a high level look at the changes that have been made to the TANF system. And this was, you know, definitely something that Hannah and I can speak to in more detail, but we were going to kind of defer to Eric since he does work for the department. But
sure.
Kind of a high level look at the changes to the system, to the TANF system would be that the time limits have been extended in the TANF system. So effective April 1st, all TANF applicants and current benefit recipients will be granted a time limit extension. As I'm sure Eric would note, this is a temporary extension due to the COVID crisis. And so this isn't kind of a permanent change to the program. But essentially for those who've reached the 60-month time limit for the program in general, extensions will be granted so folks can continue to receive benefits beyond the 60 months without another exception to the program. Those other extensions are definitely still in place, but this is creating a specific extension due to the crisis. And I think the sentiment behind that was that folks wouldn't be terminated from this vital lifeline during this crisis. The second update to the TANF program would be suspending the work first sanctions process. So as I'm sure many of you are familiar, there are work first requirements for most TANF recipients, and any sort of sanction for non-participation in the work first program have been suspended, and that's of March 16th. Oh, Eric's back on the line. Great.
All right. I apologize for that,
Oh,
folks.
no worries. I think, Eric, we had
so
Hannah,
Greta,
so.
Hannah, did you want me to just, okay.
Yeah, I just went over a
we
couple
could start with that then. Okay. Okay. I caught, she is correct. For the time being, effective April 1st, 2020, DSHS has currently, actually, since the slide shows up, does everybody mind if I just start from the very beginning?
I think it's fine for you to start from the beginning, Eric, but I would just ask that you please bear in mind that we've got a number of direct service providers on the call. So if you can talk about some of the practical changes that they need to know about right away for their clients, that would be great.
Yes.
Thank you.
As far as the first program that has been affected, it's been the SNAP and FAP programs, the federal and state food assistance programs. And on the first part of the presentation, under food, SNAP and FAP, as each point comes up, for the food assistance, these emergency food rules are cited under WAC 388437 food supplement. This applies to most food households, and I emphasize most because it will not apply to are those that are already having their food benefits decreased because they have to repay an overpayment. So if your food is not being decreased because of an overpayment, if the only reason you're not receiving the maximum allotment is because of income from another source, then for the months, the current emergency rule allows the department to supplement the household regardless of income up to the maximum allotment size for that household. So if you have a 5-person household and you're only getting $100 because of the income in your household, then for March of 2020 and April of 2020, we'll supplement that to the maximum amount allowed for the household size. The emergency rule is only good for, there's nothing that's been handed down to the department from the legislature or the governor's office or even Food 2020. The March 2020 supplement was automatically plugged into all client benefit accounts, and the April 2020 supplement will be deposited onto the client's EBT card the same day that they normally receive their food assistance. Oh, really important note here for the food supplement.
Gosh, Eric, I'm so sorry to tell you that we're really having a lot of difficulty hearing you. Your audio is cutting out quite significantly. So I'm wondering if it makes sense. Yeah, Greta, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Hannah and I can pitch in here if that would be helpful. I'm not sure. Maybe I should go. I know we were just talking about food, but maybe I'll just finish the TANF and then Hannah can talk about.
Yeah, I can do an ABOD overview.
Okay.
Okay.
Eric, I'm really sorry about that, but I think because we can't hear you, what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to share your slides, of course, and we will make those slides available to people. And that if people have specific questions about food assistance in particular, as Greta and Hannah are talking, why don't you put those in the chat box and we'll see if Eric can answer some things in the chat box. Okay.
Great. Okay, so just to cover a bit more on TANF, an additional change has been made regarding the folks who were terminated from TANF due to a sanction. Typically, the requirement is that a participant will cure their sanction, or must cure their sanction prior to continuing to receive TANF benefits or restarting their TANF benefits. However, the department has temporarily suspended that rule. This means that folks who were terminated from the TANF program and had essentially items that they had to cure before they could restart, they will no longer be required to cure those issues before reapplying for TANF. And so if you have a client who had barriers previously that they had to cure before restarting TANF, they can reapply for TANF immediately. So that's an additional change. And then the Work First Participation Program is currently suspended for all TANF participants. So this means that while these Work First activities are still available for folks, and they can certainly engage in the program if they want to and are able to, they are not required temporarily, and a participant's benefits will not be impacted for any failure to participate in Work First programs. And then the final change to the TANF program, and I'm sure Eric has a lot more nuance to add to all of these, but the final high level change would be that the Work First orientation program, so an initial element that folks had to complete before they were actually able to start receiving TANF benefits, was to attend the Work First orientation. However, the state has temporarily allowed the Work First orientation program to be completed on the computer or on the telephone. This is something that we've been talking about for quite some time, and so we're really encouraged that the state has allowed this orientation to take place virtually rather than in person, which was the prior requirement. So those are kind of the high level changes to the TANF program. And as Hannah noted, we are updating our fact sheet on a weekly basis. So far, there have been changes to update every week. And so on the Solid Ground website, we have the fact sheet for all of our benefits. So I would say to check back in there, because there's certainly other changes that we're still hoping will be enacted temporarily by the state.
So I'll give an overview about what's going on with the ABOD program. ABOD, for folks who don't know, it stands for able-bodied without dependents. So it's generally single adults, between 18 to, I think, 49 that are receiving food. So All other counties except King County have actually had a waiver. So the ABOD rules, which are that folks can receive these benefits for 3 months, and then if they don't meet certain work requirements or training, volunteer requirements, or some other exemption like they're unable to work due to a disability, they're terminated after 3 months. So King County, as of before the COVID, was the only county in Washington that was actually had the ABOD rules in place. All the other counties had waivers. So folks in King County who are currently ABODs, the department is finding good cause for all those folks for not meeting those other requirements, and they will be able to stay on food for the duration of the emergency stay-at-home pandemic. Hopefully the PowerPoint will share exactly when we think this is going to end, or if it's just for the stay-at-home order. It's certainly for March, April, and May. In all other counties, they're just not rolling out the waiver rules yet. So essentially, if folks are an ABOD and they're currently in their 3 months, they're going to be able to continue receiving those benefits. An important thing to note is if somebody was an ABOD and they already used up their 3 months, maybe their last month was February or they used up last year, they are not going to be eligible for getting back on these food benefits. So if somebody was an ABOD and they used up their months last year and they're applying and they're getting denied because they're an ABOD, that might be the reason. Still always worth it to reach out to us, and we can work with the client and check in with DSHS and make sure that that's why they're getting denied and there's not some other exemption that they should get, but that is still happening. So that's very brief overview about ABOD. For ABD, right now, DSHS is not enforcing sanctions due to the participants' inability to follow certain requirements that are interrupted because of the COVID pandemic. So for example, if somebody needed to apply for SSI, but they can't because Social Security isn't open and they're not able to get the application in, folks should absolutely be reaching out to their DSHS caseworkers so that they can explain what's going on. DSHS isn't going to know that a failure to participate or engage is because of COVID unless the client tells DSHS. But those are some things to think in mind if a client is very concerned because they're not going to be able to meet some kind of requirement. The state, as we've been told, they're not enforcing those sanctions for things related to the COVID pandemic, and that's for ABD. A quick note, this is a healthcare. There's a special enrollment period that's currently available for folks to enroll in health benefits if that's something that your clients need, and there's a link on the flyer. Hello.
All right, it looks like I'm back on. I apologize, everyone.
Thank you so much, Eric, Greta, and Hannah for dealing with these technical difficulties this morning. This is excellent information. If possible, if we could just wrap this section up quickly with some of the scenario questions that we discussed previously, just to sort of give folks a sense of what sort of issues case managers might be running across and what some creative solutions to those might be.
Sure, and maybe I can introduce a scenario, and Eric, as long as your tech is worked out, you can provide answers, because I know folks definitely want to hear from you too. So I think the first scenario is about food benefits. So Sally was previously terminated from her EBT benefits for not fulfilling the work requirements for ABOD. What should I tell them? And if I encourage them to reapply, what can I do to increase her chances of approval?
Well, as of March 18th of 2020, that person could indeed reapply for food assistance with no need to meet ABOD rules. This was actually just updated literally yesterday.
Okay.
And to kind of backtrack to what Hannah was addressing regarding ABOD participation, as of April 15th of 2020, that submits or resubmits an application as of March 18th of 2020, the ABOD rules, even if they have already used up their initial 3 months of ABOD food assistance, those are waived for the time being. This includes anybody who's already used the 3 non-qualifying months at their disposal. So as of yesterday, that person can reapply, and as long as they meet the other eligibility criteria for the food program, that person can become eligible for food assistance. Once the state of emergency is lifted by the governor, though, the regular ABOD rules will go back into effect, and if the individual no longer meets any other ABOD criteria outside of the COVID-19 exemption, then that person will again be terminated.
That's great, Eric. I'm really glad that you're able to pop in for that, because Hannah and I hadn't received that update yet. So, and I think that makes a huge difference to a lot of our clients, certainly.
Yeah, definitely.
The second scenario is about TANF. So John was required to attend weekly behavioral health check-ins as part of his individual responsibility plan for TANF benefits. The clinic that he goes to is closed and is offering remote benefits instead. John lacks reliable access to phone and internet services, making these virtual appointments difficult to keep. What would you advise?
So households are still going to be responsible for meeting the conditions of their IRP with a couple exceptions. If the services are available, then the clients are still expected to continue to comply with those services. But if they are available but not accessible, meaning, let's say in that particular example, the agency is still providing meetings, but they're providing meetings as part of a virtual or remote offering instead. It's going to be the client's responsibility to communicate that to their case manager or their social worker to let them know what's going on. Because if we don't know that, they don't have the equipment to access those services, but the provider's telling us that they're available, we are still going to hold the client responsible for meeting those criteria. So, for example, a client might have mental health treatment that they need to go to as part of their IRP. The clinician may be doing telephonic intakes, but if the client doesn't have the equipment to do the telephonic or the internet intakes, they have to communicate that to the case manager. Otherwise, they may be later on down the line subject to non-compliance. So we want to avoid that. But if the client doesn't let us know that they have limitations to access, then we can't do anything about that to work with them. So we always encourage the clients in this particular case as well, speak to your case manager and your social worker to make sure that we know what the situation is.
So that seems like a little bit of a catch-22, because if someone doesn't have the ability to call into phone appointments, how are they supposed to be able to call in to their DSHS worker?
That is something a lot of case managers sometimes do correspondence through clients via email. Clients could email their case manager. A lot of clients are also accessing the customer service center, where they can be directed directly to their case manager. And I know, like you said, that is kind of a catch-22 if they don't have a phone to contact, or if they have limited minutes for that matter to contact the provider. How is it prudent for them to contact the case manager? That's just the rule that we've been given through the legislature so far.
So that's a really important point, and I think I'm going to ask Greta and Hannah to help us think about how we might communicate with the department at the state level about this, because the clear fact is that for people experiencing homelessness, particularly with the closure of libraries, particularly with the extremely limited access to anywhere to charge a phone, get a phone, or any way to put minutes on a phone or access email, I think this is really a setup that doesn't take into account the reality for clients who don't have homes. And I understand what you're saying, Eric, but I think we're going to have to flag this at the departmental level, because this is just dramatically unfair to people who don't have access.
Yeah, Allison, I would say that this is something we've definitely been in conversation about, not only with Jason and Eric, but with the policy advocacy that we've been doing with DSHS. This is something that I have flagged to DSHS. You know, we've heard it from our team of attorneys at Solid Ground that our clients are experiencing these barriers. And so I've flagged this to DSHS. This is something we are in conversation with them about. And there are a number of like statewide policy advocacy folks who are working on, you know, not just this issue in this particular scenario, but accessibility issues in general. Lots of the, or some of the benefits have in-person interview requirements and, or that those interviews be done on the phone. But as you mentioned, a lot of our clients, the clients who utilize these benefits don't have access to a phone or internet, period. I do appreciate the note in the chat about the phone that's available, I think, at Compass Center. But yeah, it sounds like that's, you know, helpful in limited circumstances, but this is, I think, a statewide issue. We've been experiencing this with our clients at Solid Ground who used to come to our office to use the phone very regularly and now aren't able to do so. So I appreciate your you elevating this point, and this is definitely something that we are in conversation about and doing advocacy around.
Yep, thank you.
And if I may, I know that, and I apologize, I know that we're having connection issues and that we're short on time, but there is one important thing to note going back to food assistance, and that's regarding, and I'm not sure how many of your, how many of the households or homes that you deal with are students in higher education, but we have had cases through the pipeline over the last several weeks where students of higher education are losing eligibility for food assistance because they're no longer meeting the work requirements or the work study requirements for college students and food assistants. The state did put in a waiver request for this rule to Food and Nutrition Services, and unfortunately, the federal government has denied our request. So currently, when a student of higher education applies for food assistance, they're still subject to the same work requirement rules that a student under normal circumstances would be subject to. Otherwise, they're also subject to work study if they're not normally employed. We do realize that this does create a hardship. We have put in that request to FNS, and they, I believe, as recently as Tuesday, I'm sorry, they denied the state's request. So until further notice, students of higher education are still subject to the regular student status rules for food assistance, despite the COVID-19 state of emergency. And if they don't meet those requirements, they're going to be denied for food. I know this does not come as any good news to really anybody, including our line staff. They've been dealing with a lot of this over the last couple weeks, and unless FNS gives us that waiver, there's absolutely nothing that we could do about it.
Thank you, Eric. And I do want to mention that something that occurred to me as we were putting this together is that there are some on-site services still available through the CSO offices. And I think our last scenario question kind of touches on that a little bit. If we could just really quickly wrap things up with the third scenario question.
Sure.
So Alice is recently unemployed from a local business that doesn't report wage stubs. She has previously used direct deposit and only has electronic records of payment confirmation. Alice would like to apply for assistance. However, she does not have access to the internet and is concerned about using the limited minutes on her phone to apply. How would you advise Alice?
Well, for Alice, I would, when she submits an application, she can submit an application in person. And I know that offices aren't seeing people in person face to face, but most offices that are open will have a drop box, and they can drop off the application into the Dropbox that's located physically outside of the CSO. And I say most offices only because an office like the King North office that's located on North Seattle Community College's campus, because the campus is shut down, their office is shut down as well, so nobody can access that office. Other offices like Capitol Hill, Belltown, and the like, the ones that are still open, they do have drop boxes, and our limited staff do clear out the drop boxes, I believe, twice a day. So that is probably going to be the most prudent and expedient way for Alice's situation to submit the application. They can also, any client can also submit an application, again, online. I know in this situation, she doesn't have internet access, but if she has access to a fax, which may or may not be possible, faxing the application is also acceptable, as well as regular snail mail, as you'd call it, USPS mail. For the department's verification purposes, we are still following the same verification rules. However, in these particular situations, if the employer does not provide anything electronically, it's hard for us to take a bank statement, because a bank statement only tells us what the net income would be. What we would do then is the department would try to contact the employer on behalf of the client. If we can contact the employer and the employer verifies, we'll take that information and use it. If the employer can't, then if the employer was one employer that was affected by COVID-19, and as a result, this is why Alice ended up losing her employment, then under this circumstance, if it makes sense, we will just use her word and her statement, and we'll apply that to the case. If the employer does choose to call the department back, they can call the employer line, and that employer line is 877-309-9757. That employer would just have to leave the client's ID number, which is going to be used as the reference number, the client's first and last name, and just leave the information that we were asking to verify.
And I guess I would just put in one last plug for our legal services. So if someone like Alice was denied benefits based on this situation, weren't able to provide additional documentation to DSHS, or wasn't even maybe able to accept a follow-up phone call from DSHS, and was denied benefits, please contact our office, and we can be that that person in the middle who's able to hopefully make some of this contact, get some statements from former employees, or be a conduit for communication for Alice.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the current situation, I do want to emphasize that if the employer was a business that was affected by COVID-19 and the state of emergency declaration, then if there is lack of verification that can be provided on the client's end, we'll just take their statement for it for now. But we do have to remind the client that once their income does start up again, or their income from another source exceeds the income limits for their household size for food, then they're subject to the reporting requirements. But if that employer is affected by COVID-19, which resulted in the client's loss of employment, then we can take their word for it.
Excellent. Thank you three so much. Again, if you have further questions about public assistance, please put them in the chat. We've also included all of the presenters' emails in the agenda as well that you can direct questions towards. Thank you three so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, and I apologize for the connection issues.
No, we've all experienced it, Eric, and we thank you so much. We know there's a lot of great information in your slides, which we've promised everyone we will share. And, since we expect that this, like everything else, will continue to change and evolve, we want to hold open the possibility that we might invite you three and others to give an additional update about really key benefit changes that are happening. We've actually planned for an additional membership meeting by phone in 2 weeks' time. But as you hear of things, please send them to Jason, and we will get that information out to people and even schedule a special update meeting for our members. Thank you so much. This is really vital information. I also have a great connection to David Stillman. Yeah. So if we can help support advocacy, let me know.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Well, we're shifting.
I'd love to keep you updated.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Eric and Greta and Hannah. And thanks to Jason for working with everyone to gather this vital information. It always boggles my mind to see how complex these guidelines are. And even when we, as a society, choose to loosen them in a crisis, they're still incredibly complex. And let's hope this is one of the things that we get to see have some lasting changes going forward. So now we're going to welcome Dr. Julie Dombrowski from the Public Health Department. Hi. Thank you so much. I will say Dr. Dombrowski is someone who presented last week on a couple of technical assistance calls for people regarding how best to use PPE if you have it and what to do when you don't have it. And I didn't, in fact, personally get a chance to hear those presentations, but I heard rave reviews about them. I think what we hear over and over from direct service providers and managers is incredible frustration about the lack of PPE. I, having spent time in public health, know that it's really important to know how to use PPE when you have it. And I appreciate so much your willingness to include time with our members today. One thing I just want to say before we let you have the floor, as it were, is that I understand that public health is trying to do some advocacy to elevate homeless service staff from currently being tier 4. Currently getting tier 4, being at tier 4 for getting personal protective equipment, which essentially means good luck to you, to being understandably and appropriately moved higher up, potentially even to tier 1. But for right now, obviously, we know people are making do with what they have. So Dr. Dombrowski, you haven't joined us before, so I'll just let you know we have a pretty wide range of folks on our meeting, including frontline staff, direct service providers, program managers, EDs, interested and concerned members of the community. So you may get some questions from the general public, but we would so appreciate your focusing this on folks who are working in outreach, shelters, food service kinds of settings.
Great. Thank you, Allison, and thank you so much for the opportunity to come talk to you all today. I really am excited to hopefully engage in a dialogue and hear your thoughts. Allison, can I ask that you will moderate the chat box while I'm talking? Just because I know once we've got a large group, thank you so much. I know when we've got a large group, that's easier than voice and hard to speak and moderate that at the same time. So I will look to you, Allison, to signal me if there's a question you want to interrupt with.
And I will just say for the folks who are on the phone who can't use the chat box, you can send a note to sasha@homelessinfo.org, and Sasha will get your question into the chat box, an email that is. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. So I am an infectious disease physician. I work at both the University of Washington and at Public Health Seattle King County. In my pre-COVID life, I do mostly work on HIV and STDs, including working in a clinic called the Max Clinic, which is largely for people with HIV most of whom are living homeless. And in my COVID life, I am working both on messaging and trying to support shelters with the homeless support team and outreach teams as well, all of the homeless service organizations and supportive housing, and also the medical director of the isolation and quarantine sites. So I'm happy to answer. I know here we are going to talk about PPE, and my 2 sessions last week really focused on face masks, so that's where I will start. But I certainly will invite you to share comments, to share questions, and of course I don't have the answers, but can at least tell you my thoughts or my understanding of what's ongoing. So thank you all so much for the work you are doing with the most vulnerable people in our society in the midst of this pandemic. So thank you. I will just start with, as I did last week, with a few comments about masks and how we think about them, and in the broader understanding of PPE or personal protective equipment. Really, masks are the most important part of that equipment, and masks are certainly really best as a supplement to social and physical distancing. And I think you probably all know that, but it's just important to say that the best thing we have for prevention and response to COVID is physical distancing and hand hygiene. But I recognize many of you work in settings or work with people who are in settings where physical distancing may not be available and may not be an option. So the way that we, the scientific community and the public health community, have thought about masks has really changed over the course of this pandemic as we've come to understand more about the SARS-CoV-2 virus and how it's transmitted. So masks certainly can have two purposes. One is to protect the wearer from getting a virus or other infection. And the second purpose, and really the key purpose of masks now, is to prevent people from transmitting, from passing the virus on to others. So that's those two purposes of a mask are a big part of why guidance on masks has changed over the course of this pandemic. Initially, when we really thought that SARS-CoV-2 spread primarily from people who had symptoms similar to the first SARS and many other respiratory viruses, we focused on noting asymptomatic people, getting symptomatic people isolated, and thought that there was no clear benefit to the general public or to service providers wearing masks routinely, because we know from some decent, not great evidence that that doesn't offer a lot of protection over and above hand hygiene and physical distancing. But then we really understood this virus does affect a large number of people asymptomatically. Because we still don't have widespread testing, we don't have a great understanding of that, but it's probably around a quarter of people who are infected with the virus have no symptoms. Most of those, around 70%, will go on to have symptoms, but there is a lot of transmission and a lot of virus shedding in those few days before the onset of symptoms, and probably some people who have no symptoms at all and can transmit the virus. So with that understanding is what led to the Public Health Seattle King County and Washington State and CDC recommendations for the public to wear cloth masks in addition to physical distancing and hand hygiene. So the whole idea of cloth masks for the general public is to keep people who don't know they're infected from passing the virus, and that can certainly happen from coughing or sneezing, but also we now think can happen just from talking, something that we're trying to understand better. As you know, there's a PPE shortage. You all are experiencing what you just described, Allison, with being a tier 4 provider and not having access and really having to deal with the crisis level of PPE, if anything. And the healthcare setting and hospitals have had, as I'm sure you're all well aware, large PPE shortages as well. Here locally, I would say a lot of that is getting resolved and getting better, but it remains a big problem nationwide. And because of that shortage of PPE for people who were working directly in emergency rooms and COVID wards, that is the reason for the emphasis of leaving N95 and surgical masks for the healthcare setting and using cloth masks for non-healthcare settings. I also recognize, my feeling at least, is that we generally think about healthcare guidance and community guidance, and for homeless service providers, especially people working in shelters, you guys are really somewhere in between. You're not the same as the community and people living in individual houses, and you're not the same as a healthcare setting where people are being admitted to be treated for COVID, but you've got a mix of healthy and unhealthy, those were not the best words, people who have the virus and people who don't have the virus, and you often can't know and don't have adequate testing. So I recognize you're in this sort of gray zone between a healthcare setting and a community setting. So I think the key things to understand about the mask are that really, if you use a mask correctly, something is better than nothing. So having a cloth mask that covers the nose and mouth and ideally secures behind the ears or behind the head is key. And just a few messages about that are that it's always good to, you always want to use hand hygiene first. So the ways to appropriately use a mask. First, you want to ideally wash your hands with soap and water for 20 minutes. If that's not available, use a good alcohol hand sanitizer, grab the mask just by the straps. I realize now I should have brought a visual, but you all can imagine, and put it around the ears or tie, ideally without touching the face. And then really importantly, for an episode of mask wearing, which may be an outing to the grocery store, it may be a shift at work, it may be a whole day, the mask needs to stay in position. So really importantly, you shouldn't be touching it. You shouldn't be pulling it below your nose or mouth to talk. It needs to stay in position to work and to avoid contaminating your own face by pulling down the mask. So washing hands, putting on the mask, not touching it, and then when it comes off, similarly, grabbing the back and pulling forward, being careful not to touch the outside of the mask to your face, and then washing the mask, ideally just in a regular washer with hot water and detergent. For our clients who don't have access to that, ideally hot water as you can get it with soap. And I realize people sometimes don't even have great access to that. So I would just say we all have to do the best we can with what we have. Ideally, there is some washing in between mask wearing. So I have more comments, but realize I need to stop and start being a little bit more interactive. So Allison, I will invite you to guide this a bit.
Sure, thank you so much. I will encourage people to add questions. Here's one. What do we do if the mask slips down while we're talking? My staff and I have had this issue with ear loop masks.
Yeah, that's a great question. So an ideal mask would really be secure and not slip, but I recognize because the same thing has happened to me, that in, again, an ideal setting, if a mask slips down and touches your face, gets dirty, you would discard it and use a new mask. In a non-ideal setting, and assuming that you're probably mostly working with non-medical masks, put the mask back on. Covering your nose and mouth to keep you or the wearer from shedding virus is really the key.
And because there is such a mask shortage, one of the things that I think is real is that some staff don't have any masks, and most people experiencing homelessness don't have any masks. Do you have any thoughts about what to do if you don't have access to any kind of mask?
Yes, that's a great question. So first, I would refer to a resource. I realize this may not work for residents, but I think many staff could come up with alternative masks. The CDC mask website actually has a number of great suggestions. One is a sewn mask. So for people who have a sewing machine and want to take that on, great. But there are also things like taking the bottom of a t-shirt and cutting out a part of it and clipping off those. And then you have a cotton mask that you can tie behind your head. So if you have access to an old t-shirt, that can be used for a mask. If you have a balaclava from skiing and are not too uncomfortable and can pull it up and use it, that can serve as a mask. And then certainly bandanas, especially the CDC website has instructions for using a bandana with a coffee filter, where you fold the bandana over the coffee filter and then you fold the bandana ends over 2 hair ties to make a mask. I think there are a number of creative ways that you can try and use masks. There is also a resource. Some of you on the call may know more about this than me, so please pipe in if you do. There is a resource called the Seattle Mask Brigade that is making cloth masks for a number of agencies in Seattle and King County. I don't know how, if that's still going on.
Yes.
And how up to date they are, but that is an option as well.
Yes, there are a number of groups like that, including Crafters Against COVID-19. I will say they're doing incredible work, and some of the masks are beautiful. And also there are folks who work at Reach who are people who know how to sew. There are people who have we've requested, I think 1,500 masks to the coalition to help us distribute them to people. But the reality is that it's taking several weeks now to fill requests like that. One of the things that I think we'll need to talk with some of the few remaining places that have laundry capacity for is to think about offering people masks and then offering people a way to drop those masks off to be laundered. And do you anticipate any challenge if I were to use a mask and then drop it off to get washed, and then somebody handed you that washed mask Do you have concerns about that?
I don't, because as far as we know, which we are always learning about this virus, but it really does seem like just a hot wash with detergent does cleanse it. So yes, I think it is fine if you, for instance, dropped off a big group and picked a big group back up. I also just want to recognize, Allison, that you and others on this call probably have more experience than me with coming up with some of these creative solutions. So I would love to hear as well from the audience if people have other thoughts.
Great.
How to cope in the shortage.
Right. Well, we'll ask for that. And I think we may ask you to come back and talk a little bit about I&Q and possibly testing. Those are two areas where I know there've been some real concerns, but I don't want to sort of muddy the issues right now. I think the last thing is we as a coalition and our members and the people experiencing homelessness have expressed great concern about the lack of access to hand washing. And as you yourself just shared with us, hot running water and soap are really the ways to wash your hands. And hand sanitizer is a secondary, better than nothing and good if you don't have access option. But I think as we try to work with local government to ensure that they do, you know, what we have recommended, frankly, is to open up public buildings for the access to toilets and sinks rather than relying solely on porta potties and hand washing stations. Could you talk a little bit about hand washing? I hope people have seen the videos of how to wash your hands well and got 20 seconds is really what a good hand washing regimen is. But could you talk a little bit about hand washing and use of hand sanitizer, please?
Yes, that's great. So yes, if you have access to a sink with hot water and soap, that is the ideal way to clean your hands. And the 20 seconds is longer than most of us tend to wash our hands. So it takes some work. There are things like singing happy birthday twice, or I don't know, whatever creative way you want to do 20 seconds. But I think
Gloria
the
Gaynor
key is not to just, what did you say?
Gloria Gaynor.
Oh yeah, even better, so much better than happy birthday, yes. Okay, so I think the key is not just doing this, but also remembering to get in between, and I have a ring on, so under rings, in between the sort of finger webs, and then around the base at the wrist as well is really key. So I think just repeating those, taking time to do that, and doing a full 20 seconds is the key. And Allison, I hear you loud and clear, and I really appreciate your group's advocacy on this point, because I hear you. It's not widely available.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would appreciate the chance to follow up with you, because I think there's the barriers that exist seem to me to be barriers that can be overcome. And we have heard from many community members who want to help staff public restrooms. And so I think maybe getting some alliance with public health to communicate to public officials about the urgent and necessary nature of this would probably be helpful in getting some movement. So thank you so much. I'm not seeing other questions. I think that we, in our 7 minutes, need to talk a little bit about things, including advocacy, but I want to express just deep appreciation. It's so wonderful to have the pragmatic and the medical perspectives, because I think everyone on this call is very well acquainted with the guidance and what the best case scenario or best practices are. And as we keep reminding everyone, homeless service providers and people who are homeless themselves are the ultimate adapters and creative problem solvers. But sometimes people get worried that their problem solving might take them in the wrong direction. So we really appreciate your taking the time to join us, and thank you for the work that you and your teams are doing as well.
Thank you, Allison. And I am going to take 5 seconds to ask that I know a huge frequently asked question is how to deal with clients who will not wear a mask or who do not do the guidance. So I would love to follow up on, I don't have the answer to that, but how we might crowdsource and peer-to-peer teach how to deal with those difficult situations.
Thank
you
you.
so
That's
much for having me.
actually the perfect segue to one of the things we're going to talk about, which is we're trying to figure out how to do some problem solving. Normally our meetings are in person and we get to talk as a group with each other. And shifting to doing this via Zoom means that we don't get to have that dialogue. But one of the things I heard from somebody who works at one of our member organizations is that they had a client, a guest at their shelter who really has some serious mental health challenges. And there's really only one staff person whom that guest will interact in a productive way with. And they've actually paid that staff person overtime to come in extra hours to be able to engage with their guest to try to help get some better compliance with the hand washing and distancing and staying away from other guests. I think that's an extraordinary example, but it also speaks to the probably unsustainable nature of some of the ways that we're trying to support people. We see a huge need for additional staff support for pandemic pay, but also for behavioral health support in congregate care settings. And so one of the things that we thought we would do is we will send this as our follow-up to everybody on this call and really to our general membership list. We thought we might just create a Zoom call where there's kind of a best practice chat or creative problem-solving chat with folks who are running shelter and day and hygiene programs to just talk about what's working, what have you been doing. And so you'd be welcome to join us, Dr. Dombrowski, because I think that's kind of what people need is, here's the real deal. How have you been dealing with this? And I think we'll invite people to do that maybe as a little, you know, free-form facilitated chat. Okay, great. Jason, I think you might be the next person to coordinate and facilitate the last part of our meeting here.
Thank you, Allison. Just a couple of very quick updates to round out our meeting with. First being an update on the 2020 census. The timeline to complete the census has been pushed back. The deadline for completing the form has been extended from August through to the end of October. So we've been given a little more time for that. In terms of service-based enumeration, which is the count of those without a traditional address that occurs at shelters, meal programs, places where folks access services. The Census Bureau has not yet given us a timeline for when that is going to be conducted. They do plan on conducting this count in conjunction with a lifting of the stay home order. So we will be updating you when we have information on when that will be happening. In the meantime, there's no reason to not fill out the census now, either online or over the phone. We certainly don't want to tell you to make this a priority given everything else that's going on, but if you have the opportunity to help a client complete the census form, that will make things a little bit easier by the end of all things. And we also want to quickly mention that on our blog with a list of resources is a fact sheet that was put together by Tracy Jones, Program Manager at the Washington Department of Veteran Affairs. There are some additional resources that have come online to help service-connected veterans access housing services and case management services. So please look for that on our blog with the other resources from today's meeting. And then Allison, I think you were going to talk a little bit about our efforts around hygiene in the community.
Yes, I'd like to talk briefly about the advocacy that the coalition has been doing, not only around access to hygiene, sanitation and clean water, but also around the critical need for additional shelter and the need to ensure that that the congregate shelter settings are as safe as possible for the guests and staff. So I would like to just recognize that there's some queries happening in the chat box, so please do continue to do that. We're not going to have time to address those right now. But Hillary talked at the beginning of our meeting about the Homeless Service Change Tracker project. And as a result of that project, which I believe included contacting 133 programs at 60 organizations, we know that there is a drastic reduction in access to services. And even those programs that have done terrific work to stay open and in some cases extend their service hours, we've seen a reduction in the number of people who can be served at one time so that social distancing is maintained. And in fact, what that means is that with the closure of public buildings, with the closure of businesses that sometimes allowed people to use restrooms, plug in their phones, or sit down and get a rest, with the fact that meal programs have shifted to grab and go or closed, and with the fact that hygiene centers are limiting the numbers of people who can come in to use toilets, showers, or laundry, we had what was inadequate before the pandemic hit, and what is now just drastically inhuman, I would say. We have been gathering stories and information from people experiencing homelessness and from outreach staff and from all of you. I think our next task, so last Wednesday, the Seattle City Council held a select committee on homelessness and affordable housing committee meeting. It is the only committee meeting other than regular council meetings that the City Council has hosted. If you want to, we will share the video link so that you can watch that 2-hour meeting. And I want to recognize the terrific testimonials that were brought forward by Colleen Echohawk from the Chief Seattle Club, by 2 of the Reach outreach workers, and by Brittany Meek, who's the manager overseeing all outreach teams at DESC, who really did exactly what we asked for, which is to tell City Council members the reality of what's happening on the ground. The city has put additional porta potties and hand washing stations out and has done work to open additional parks restrooms. However, there are some limitations and difficulties with those that I won't sort of go into now. And in any case, it's still not adequate. So we continue to advocate for opening public buildings, which will need to be staffed either by paid people or volunteers or a combination, and that will need to be cleaned by people who are able to follow the extremely important and detailed cleaning guidelines that specifically help protect against COVID, against the coronavirus and against the hepatitis A virus. So we're working on that. We have continued to elevate the need for access to hand washing at meal sites. What I want to say is that we're now at the point where many people who do good work and who mean absolutely well are trying to advocate for a lot of things, and it's becoming quite difficult to sort of coordinate that. So one meal provider who's frustrated about having to serve everything in a to-go container and seeing a lot of garbage accumulate as a result of that around their meal site was speculating that it might be useful to go provide meals at the places where porta potties exist. But I think the reality is that we know that that's quite likely to result in additional garbage and people not having access to a way to dispose of their food and other garbage at those sites. So we need to, I think, figure out how we're going to address that, as well as talk to our friends at the Seattle Public Library and the King County Library System about how they might be able to support this work, since libraries have been such a critical gathering place for people who don't have anywhere else to be during the day. And then we're also advocating, obviously, for additional good quality shelter to be available for people, particularly for access to hotel and motel and dormitory rooms. So we will keep you guys all posted about that and about how you can step up. If you're, I see there's somebody here who is associated with the public library, so we'd like to hear from you. If you're providing access to restrooms and sanitation services, we'd like to hear from you about what your thoughts are about the possibility with financial support of expanding access to those services. We realize that's a bit of a lift given the staffing issues that a lot of agencies are contending with. And then finally, I just want to say we have been talking, both Metro and Sound Transit have reached out to us. They are concerned with maintaining social distancing on public transit. And they recognize that there are a lot of people experiencing homelessness who are on buses and trains. I will say that they, Metro in particular, understands that you can't simply ask people to leave because they are riders with no known destination. But we have been really trying to encourage them to work with us to make resources available, including offering hand sanitizer and tissues to people, as well as masks, and also helping us get access to public buildings that have restrooms in them and that could potentially help make up for some of the loss of safe, accessible places for people to be during the day. So a lot of that work is going on, I would say, somewhat behind the scenes. It's partly just the nature of how things are going now, but I'm happy to hear from anyone who has suggestions or can offer assistance, and we will keep you all up to date. I think that's the end of my part of this, and we're a little bit past our time, so I want to just pause there. Jason, can you wrap us up? Because I'm not looking at the agenda right now. Oh, and while Jason is unmuting himself, I will say that because we know things are moving so fast, we're asking you to hold Thursday, April 30th from 9 to 10:30. Thank you, Sasha, for a potential additional coalition membership call, because there's just so much going on and we probably need to get together before May 21st.
Thank you, Allison. I believe that was what we had planned for today. If you'd like to use any remaining time for questions or feedback, we'd love to hear from you all for a moment.
And I would say, for those who have stuck with us, since Anitra is still here and offered that she might be willing to read another poem at the end of our meeting, I would love to let Anitra do that, and we'll keep the chat open and keep the call line open for maybe another 5 to 7 minutes.
I just had one quick.
Oh, please, Pete.
So the Compass Center was planning a grand reopening next week before all of this broke out, but I just wanted to continue to remind people that we are still open for our regular hours. We have hygiene services, including laundry, showers, bathrooms, and hand washing stations. We have hand washing stations throughout the building. We are fully supplied as of today, and we still have all of our regular services such as banking, mail. We have our community computers and phones and our housing navigators. So 77 South Washington Street, if anybody has clients or neighbors that they think need some help, we're still here.
That's really wonderful, Pete, that you've been able to maintain that service level, and the specific hours are going to be in the tracker that's going to be posted later today on our website. Thank you very much, Pete, and your whole team. Okay, Anitra, would you like to close us out?
All right, do you want just one or two?
I think maybe in recognition of the fact that our meeting ended 7 minutes ago and we lost half our people already, let's go with one, but we'll have you back.
I have a very short one that was very appropriate for.
Thank you.
Sending us off. How do we mourn 100 children? Feel the absence of one small hand and then one other. How do we mourn 100 women? Listen to one missing voice and then another. How do we mourn 100 men? Trace the shape of one missing face and then one more. How do we save 1,000 lives? Hold one hand, listen to one voice, look in one face at a time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anitra. Thank you very much. One of the things that we're going to ask people if they'd like to do is to maybe do an online talent share. And we might ask you to be one of our MCs, Anitra, because I think that could be kind of fun.
Gladly.
Thank you. All right, well, it's wonderful to have seen your faces. Please take care of yourselves. Thank you, Janelle. It's really hard to be apart, but we do feel together when we're all on this call together. Thank you so much for sharing information, for doing your important work, for respecting people, and for taking care of yourselves and each other. And we'll look forward to being in contact with you after this call and on Thursday, April 30th, Thursday, May 21st, and probably a lot of calls in between. Thank you.